Hello and welcome back to another video. It's the mid-monthly wrap-up this time and I wanted to talk about a few books here. I have technically talked about them already, but I just wanted to do so on a little bit deeper basis than just be like, hey, I read it. It's a graphic novel and it's fun. That's why I'm doing those videos, and that's why I also will be talking about the Midnight Library again, although I have technically already talked about it twice on my channel and I haven't said the greatest things about it. I don't want to unnecessarily triple down on that fact, don't get me wrong, I just want to kind of explain where I think the bad writing happens, for example, or where we just didn't connect, and let's talk about it. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to. So, The Midnight Library, Matt Haig. Just once and for all, I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads. It's not the worst book I've ever read though, but it's still something that I feel like was a battle to read. I believe I already mentioned that I think it's very pseudo-philosophical, it is very superficial, it is pretentious in my opinion, it has very pretentious scenarios and writing, it is super constructed, very rigid I guess, in its direction. Let's just start from the beginning, okay? Let's just talk about the plot for a second here. So our main protagonist is Nora Seed, and you just happen to jump into the story at one of her lowest points in her life. So it starts with the death of her cat. Then she gets fired from a job, she runs into an ex-band member that I don't know, insults her, runs into an ex-classmate which she haven't seen for the longest time and who's just, you know, judging her. And then I think then she ends up killing herself, or at least attempting to kill herself, and then she wakes up in the Midnight Library, which is her special and very personal place of limbo. I think it's something between life and death, and she gets the chance to just take another route down life, and with that she'll be able to see what her life would have looked like if she chose differently. So let's address one problematic for me. I want to talk about bad writing. I wish that the first 20 pages of this book would not exist, because in these 20 or what pages you basically just get introduced to every scenario that will happen to Nora. Oh, so she didn't sign the record deal? I wonder what she will do later in the book. Nonetheless, what doesn't help with the feeling of constructedness is also that the characters in the first pages are just simply there to update the reader on where Nora has been and what happens to her. They have no believable personality traits whatsoever. Like the second person that she talks to, which is her boss, I believe, is just the perfect example for a walking contradiction. He cared enough to remember details like how her brother looked like or what his name was and how like her history with her mother. That is not a boss who doesn't care and who would fire you when you're on your lowest point. Why would you be such an asshole and not even disguise the reason for firing her? Why not say something like, oh, we simply don't have the money anymore, that the store isn't doing too well, I have to let go of employees? Why not say it like that? No, he really literally tells her that her face is probably the reason why they don't have customers, because she's so down all of the time. Who the fuck says things like that? Which boss says things like that? I get that it's just to emphasize that she's like in really shitty circumstances, but it's just so far from how a person would behave to me that I can't take it seriously at all. I can't emerge into the story because this is so absurd. So absurd. Then there's the next person, which is her brother's roommate, her ex band member, who gives her shit about why she left the band, and he's like, oh, we could have been so successful if you just didn't leave the band. Many bands have had band members leaving right before they got big, and you know what they did? They found another band member. There are things happening like that. It's not as if someone leaving a band would be the end of the world if you really wanted to make it work. And then he's blaming her for not having money, which, dude, the only person who's to blame for you not working is you for not working. It's just so stupid. It's just straight up dumb. And the next character is this lady which she hasn't seen in over 10 years, which she went to class with or school with, and she just basically, literally, and I had to, like, I was furious, but I also had to laugh out loud because it was just too ridiculous. She basically, the first thing she asks are very private questions, like, what do you do for a living? What's your job? Do you have a husband? Do you have a relationship? Do you have children? And when Nora says no, she's like, really? She really says, tick-tock. That is, I don't have to tell you how inappropriate this is, and I understand that Haig just tried to make this character unlikable and try to, you know, tell us where else Nora has like regrets and things like that. But it's just so... What? Who does that? What is the luck of you bumping into 3 people just like that, back to back? So stupid. I don't know. That's just too... I'm sorry, but I'm not believing anything in here. I'm like, what the fuck am I reading right now? This is not a good story. And then, yeah, obviously, besides Nora just going through one scenario after the other where she just chose differently in her life, there's not much to it. There's one other thing that I'm gonna address. It's gonna be the final thing that I'm ever going to say about this book, hopefully, unless it comes up in a tag or something, but I'm sorry for my emotions. Pardon me if that feels unnecessary. Probably it is. So yeah, the other reason is a connection issue, like where we just are not on the same page, the book and I, and that is the main topic of holding regrets. Regrets itself are not something I believe in. And at this point I want to insert a clip of Jenna Marbles talking about holding regrets.
I know a lot of people that use the word regret and live with regrets, and I just disagree with that 100%, because I feel like whatever choice you made in the past, you made the best choice that you could, given the circumstances and any possible moment that you could make. And if you just shift the word regret into, I made the best possible choice I could at the time, you don't have to live with any regrets. And it also helps me understand other people and why they do the things that they do. They're just making the best possible choice for them. I don't have to think about why or what they're doing, or I don't have to think about it. It's so incredibly liberating to not have any regrets, and also sometimes just not be mad at people because they're just doing the best that they can, just like you.
So hopefully that is enough said and we can move on to the next books, which will be those, all of them part of last week's video again. I'm gonna start with Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman. This is a children's book. It's about the father who goes out to get some milk for his children, and it takes him a while to come back. And because this is a children's book, it doesn't end up with the father vanishing and leaving the family. It ends up with him coming back and having exciting stories to tell. They're not really believable stories, but that doesn't matter. They're quite entertaining. I have to say, to me, they were a bit too chaotic and a bit too jumpy, but I am not a child. I don't even know for what age range that would be appropriate. So yeah, I don't feel able to judge it. But mind you, if it wouldn't have been Neil Gaiman that wrote that book, I probably wouldn't have ended up giving it 3 stars. I shouldn't rate a children's book. I did it nonetheless because, yeah, it's my experience with it. I rated it from my point of view. Then I listened to a poetry collection by Sarah Bosetti, which is called I don't have anything against women, you bitch. Ich hab nichts gegen Frauen, du Schlampe. It was that catchy title, yeah. This is a collection of answers in poetry format 2 hate comments. And I don't, as I said, know a lot about poetry. I don't think that I'm qualified to judge whether poetry is good or bad, but I enjoyed it. I think it was partly beautiful. But maybe that was also the contrast of how shocking some of the comments actually were that she received, because she's talking on multiple topics in her podcasts, I think, or radio show, or whatever she does. And when the people, the hate commenters, criticized her, they never criticized her for what she said, but for being a woman. And we all know that men are just much smarter than women, or in general. How can she even comprehend the things that she's talking about when her tiny female brain can't even understand the greater connections? But nice breasts though, and also I hope you get raped in a dark alley. Yeah, that's the extent of the comments that she got, and I was furious, but every time that she answered in this nice and poetic way, I calmed down and was like, yeah, that is beautiful. Let's move on. I read The Pale White by Chet Litzke, and this is a horror book. It's about 3 girls who were held hostage in a cellar or something, and it starts with the night of their escape. So it's a short story, and I can't really say more about it without spoiling you, but it was sweet somehow, like really a bit wholesome, but a bit weird as well. I don't know, I gave it 3 stars. If you are running out of horror books and you're desperately looking for something and you're really out of options, maybe this could be a book for you. But other than that, I don't really see why you should pick that up, unless it's for like a challenge to try and finish a book in a day. Then I have listened to The Wasp's Nest by Agatha Christie, which is a 20-minute audio book. Apparently it's a whole book with Hercule Poirot about a murder that hasn't happened yet. And there's like not really a lot to say about it. It's basically, if you have ever read any Agatha Christie book, it's one of those. So if you're just looking for a fun and short story in between doing things, or you know, waiting on something or whatever, I think that is a fun story. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then let's move on to the graphic novels that I have here, which is Saga Volume 2 and Saga Volume 3. And although I kind of said I didn't just want to say that I love the art style and then move on, I also never said that I wouldn't say it again. I love the art style of Saga. I think it's really beautiful to look at. I love the creatures that the, I think, author or illustrator came up with. I guess the illustrator came up with. It has kind of a very classical story in the beginning. Like, it starts off with the explanation that there's a war going on between 2 fractions or 2 races or 2 planets. I'm not sure on that one. And those are like the guys with the wings on the back, and then the dudes with the horns on the head. And 2 of those people, who should actually supposedly be enemies, fall in love with each other, and then they have a baby. And this is how the whole thing starts with, actually. Like, this is, I think, the first scene is the birth of this multiracial child, if you will. And then the story just kind of takes off. It takes us on the journey of those young parents who are trying to flee from headhunters who are out there to get them, because what they are doing is just simply not right. There's not much to say about it yet, because I just simply, you know, I'm not even half through the whole story, and the story is still developing, but I would say that it's great fun. I think sometimes graphic novels struggle with the plot a bit, because they simply rely on the pictures to drive you through the read. But I don't feel that way with Saga. I think the story is almost as strong as the drawings are. And then, to wrap this whole mid-monthly wrap-up up, I want to talk about Misery. I think I found a new favorite Stephen King novel. The Shining used to be my favorite Stephen King book up until the point that I read Misery. One of the reasons why I like it more than The Shining is that it has this element of mind manipulation to it. Like, you see how the character's mind changes over time and gets influenced and manipulated by its surroundings. And it's very traceable, it's very believable, but minus the supernatural element, which makes it even more believable to me, and even more horrifying. And oh my god, let me just tell you about this book. Let's start with the plot. So the plot is about this writer named Paul Sheldon, who has a car accident and then gets rescued by Annie Wilkes, just gonna call her Annie. And when he wakes up in the bed of her guest room, he slowly comes to the realization, well, that this may be circumstances that he will not leave in the near future, because Annie isn't really willing to call an ambulance or the police or to tell anyone that Paul Sheldon, the writer of her favorite novel series of all time, is in her guest room. Do you see my dog ears? You probably can't see, but I have dog-eared a lot in this book, which is, I don't usually do that, please don't crucify me. But I was reading this mainly when I was on the road to get to work and stuff, and I didn't have the tabs with me, so I had to like mark it with a dog ear. It was just so fantastic. And I think there's one that is a bit off from all the other ones, where it's like a bigger dog ear, which is on page 246, which, if you don't have the same edition as I do, this is like 2/3 into the book. When I read that, you know, I had to look up and make sure that it was in a safe environment. I was really not feeling well. If you know the book, you probably know which scene I'm talking about, but that was just a lot. Oh my god. It has some fantastic, horrible scenes in here. And what I love about it is that it's all so authentic. Stephen King is not only just talking about like a person being trapped in a room, he's talking about an author, the mind of an author. So I assume that a lot of the thoughts that Paul Sheldon has, he has had in some way or another himself. And this whole writer's conversation just gives the book another layer. It's not just this horror thing, it's also a deep reflection on the artistry of writing. It's so insightful. And every time that Paul found himself like in a tricky situation, I always understood why he did the things that he did. And I appreciate that about horror books. You know, this feeling when you're watching a horror movie and you're just like looking at the screen, wondering why a person would be so stupid to do such things. I've never had that thought with Misery. That's what made it so good, what made it so real, what made it so horrifying. I don't know if I've mentioned the rating yet. I gave this book 5 stars, obviously. With that, we have reached the end of the video. So I'll see you at another time in another video. Bye!